Previously on the show, the hospital reforms triggered a chain reaction. Shaun was furious at Salen's new policies, but after calming down, he used his brilliance to save a patient. Leonard, who had suffered years of bullying, was left clinging to life due to brain damage. But with his daughter Emily's difficult decision, he was given a second chance at life. And the love and perseverance between father and daughter moved everyone deeply. Brandon was critically injured after falling from a great height, and although he never regained consciousness, his organs ended up saving 63 lives, allowing love to be passed on. Morgan compromised between profit and conscience, causing Nira to lose her only chance at full recovery, while Salen's web of power grew tighter and tighter. In a bid to gain fame, Marcus forced through a high-risk surgery, and although Nellie miraculously survived, the hospital's moral bottom line was steadily collapsing. Shaun suddenly stormed into the pharmacy and smashed bottle after bottle of medicine off the shelves. What exactly happened that triggered such a violent emotional outburst from Shaun? It turned out that a large batch of expired medication had appeared in the hospital, and the use of these expired drugs caused a patient to die in the operating room. Shaun's face turned red with rage. Like a mad bull, he could only let out a painful roar, yet he was helpless against the dark forces behind the hospital. The whole mess began 2 days earlier with a car accident where a pregnant woman was trapped inside the vehicle, unable to move her legs and suffering severe chest pain. By feeling her pulse, Shaun suspected the woman had developed cardiac tamponade, which needed immediate relief. Otherwise, she would lose her heartbeat before the ambulance arrived. Luckily, Shaun was right there, carrying a large needle with him, ready to perform a pericardiocentesis on Alma to drain the accumulated blood. At that moment, Shaun appeared unusually relaxed, even cracking a few jokes with Alma. But as soon as Shaun revealed the needle, Alma fainted from fright. Although Shaun didn't mind, he calmly unbuttoned her clothes, inserted the needle with practiced ease, and gently drew out the blood. Soon after, Alma regained consciousness, only to be greeted by another one of Shaun's improvised jokes. Alma was quickly rushed to the hospital, but during surgery, the doctors discovered her pelvis had been shattered. Now Alma faced two options: either wait until after the baby was born to repair the pelvis, risking paralysis, or perform an immediate C-section and repair the pelvis right away. But this would mean a premature birth with low survival chances for the baby. Faced with these two difficult choices, Alma hesitated for a moment, but her maternal instinct quickly took over, and just as she was about to choose to save the baby, tragedy struck. She suddenly felt sharp abdominal pain, and after Shaun's diagnosis, they realized it was delayed trauma causing placental abruption, leaving Alma with no choice but to undergo an emergency C-section. In the operating room, the doctors worked together and finally delivered the baby, but at only 26 weeks old, the baby was bound to have complications. As expected, the baby quickly slipped into severe respiratory distress, and although the doctors immediately performed CPR, the situation remained critical. Just when everyone was at a loss, Shaun identified the cause. The baby had a congenital heart defect and needed medication to restore breathing. The nurse rushed to the pharmacy to grab the drug and handed it to Shaun, who carefully adjusted the dosage for the baby and administered it, but the result was unexpected. The baby's vital signs showed no improvement. Did Shaun make a mistake? Everyone was in disbelief, and Shaun couldn't figure out what had gone wrong until he picked up the medicine bottle and finally discovered the problem. Lim immediately ordered the nurse to fetch another batch of medicine, only to be told that due to Salen's cost-cutting reforms, the pharmacy had drastically reduced its inventory budget, and all remaining drugs came from the same batch. At that moment, Shaun thought of a solution. They could mix 2 other drugs to achieve the same effect, but the pharmacy refused, unwilling to take responsibility. Shaun didn't care. He ripped off his surgical gown, stormed into the pharmacy, grabbed the needed medicine, and sprinted back to the operating room. But even after frantically preparing the new mixture, the medicine still had no effect, and it turned out that these drugs were also expired. Shaun continued his desperate attempts, pumping the baby's heart non-stop, but it was all in vain. And eventually, the doctors shut down the machines and solemnly pronounced the baby's time of death. Shaun's grief turned into uncontrollable rage, and he stormed into the pharmacy, checking bottle after bottle on the shelves. His girlfriend Leah tried to stop him, but Shaun pushed her away, unable to trust her anymore, because Leah had supported the hospital's new policies, and it was Salen's aggressive commercial reforms that had flooded the pharmacy with expired drugs. Shaun collapsed in a corner, clutching his head, unable to comprehend why doctors, whose mission was to save lives, had become tools for greedy businessmen. Now that a life had been lost, Shaun could no longer hold it in. Meanwhile, Salen, the one orchestrating all of this, shed a crocodile tear when confronted by Lim. She insisted that the doctors involved in the surgery must not leak the truth, or else everyone, including the hospital itself, would suffer. Then, the next day, Salen immediately went to find Alma, completely absolved herself of any responsibility, shifted all the blame onto Shaun, and then offered to waive Alma's medical expenses along with a $200,000 settlement. Then she turned to the pharmacist, revealing her trump card, an unbeatable legal team that could turn black into white if necessary. After a round of threats and temptations, the pharmacist had no choice but to sign the agreement. Relying on the power of capital, Salen eliminated dissenters one by one, and the hospital was almost completely under her control. Only Director Lim saw through Salen's schemes, and in order to bring Salen down, Lim tirelessly gathered evidence of her misconduct day and night. She first approached the pharmacist to act as a witness and testify against Salen's dirty dealings in court. At that time, the pharmacist was also harboring resentment and finally found an outlet, so he agreed to Lim's request. Lim wanted to find more like-minded allies in the hospital, but most people had already been bought off and kept their distance from her. Her former colleagues seemed to have turned into strangers, and even worse, just before the trial, Lim received news that the pharmacist had changed his mind. It turned out that Salen had offered him even more money. Clearly, Salen had already noticed Lim's actions, and she mocked Lim for not knowing her place, daring to challenge capital. The next day, when Lim came to work, she found that her office had already been taken over, with Marcus, who had sided with Salen, replacing her as the chief of surgery, and soon she would be reassigned to a more remote location. At this point, it seemed that Lim was no match for Salen. At the critical moment, it was still Shaun who took the lead. He found Salen and Marcus during their secret meeting and spoke his true feelings.
Was bad medicine. Dr. Andrews used to be a good doctor, but you made him a bad one. I need to leave before you make me a bad doctor. I quit.
Glassman tried to persuade Shaun to learn to accept reality, telling him the world was full of unfairness and that those who were not smooth enough would not survive for long. But Shaun refused, and his stubbornness was like a shot of adrenaline that rallied all the righteous people in the hospital together. They turned their accusations toward Marcus and Morgan, and both sides hurled blame at each other furiously. Then Alex also followed Shaun's lead, expressing his dissatisfaction by resigning. Soon, more and more hospital staff joined in the resignations and planned to expose Salen's scandals at the annual meeting. However, everyone knew the consequences of doing so. Even if they could take Salen down, these disobedient individuals would likely be blacklisted across the entire industry. Justice and evil entered their final showdown. Salen appeared relaxed and cheerful as she approached the venue with her unbeatable team of lawyers. At that moment, Marcus also walked toward her from another direction. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what move he would make. To their surprise, Marcus pulled out a document listing all the improper decisions that had been made since Salen took over the hospital. It turned out that his conscience had been awakened by Shaun and the others, so he chose to betray Salen at the most critical moment. Salen never expected that Marcus, who had always appeared to be the most loyal, would end up betraying her. Gritting her teeth in anger, she had no choice but to admit defeat, signing an agreement on the spot, confessing her wrongdoings, and voluntarily stepping down from her position as president. Thus, the battle finally came to an end, and Shaun and the other good doctors ultimately defeated the power of capital. While performing surgery, Lim saw a cobra crawling out from the patient's pants and quickly warned everyone to be careful. However, the others looked confused because they didn't see any snake. Shaun realized something was wrong, so he rushed back to the emergency room, where he found the entire medical staff acting crazy, some crawling under beds and others spinning in circles blowing bubbles. Shaun's girlfriend, Leah, also said that everything she looked at seemed to be on fire. But luckily her symptoms were mild enough that she could still muster the strength to investigate the cause. They quickly discovered that the delirious medical staff had all attended a breakfast party at the hospital that morning. Leah suspected that there had been a problem with the food, leading to collective food poisoning and hallucinations. Considering there were vegetarians among the victims, after ruling out all meat dishes, only 3 vegetarian dishes remained. None of the 3 were mushrooms, so Leah started investigating dish by dish, and after questioning everyone, she found that a nurse who only ate roasted sweet potatoes was also affected. Soon, Leah located the cooks responsible for the dishes, but they were confused and unaware of what had gone wrong. To get to the bottom of it, they searched their home and found a suspicious canister of powder in the spice cabinet. Upon seeing it, they finally understood that it was a type of hallucinogenic mushroom powder that had been mistakenly used as seasoning during cooking, leading to the disaster. With the cause finally uncovered, Morgan immediately set to work treating the affected doctors. But until everyone recovered, the only one still able to work in the emergency room was Shaun. Shaun's first patient looked decent enough, but as soon as he arrived, he asked where the proctology department was, and Shaun instantly understood his meaning. Shaun reassured the patient not to be afraid and to speak openly, promising that no matter how funny it was, as a professional, he would not laugh. After some simple treatment, Shaun handed him over to the proctology department. Next, another doctor sent over a hypertensive patient, and since Shaun needed to treat as many patients as possible, he skipped reviewing the patient's medical history and asked directly. But how could a patient possibly recite their entire medical history on the spot? And under Shaun's intense questioning, the patient's blood pressure shot even higher. Seeing the situation worsening, Shaun quickly ordered the nurse to prepare medication, but the moment it was injected, an unexpected side effect occurred, and the patient suddenly went into respiratory distress. Shaun hurried to save him with a ventilator. Afterward, Shaun had no choice but to call Glassman for help, and upon examination, Glassman found that the patient had a history of asthma, meaning Shaun had used the wrong medication and triggered the asthma attack. Because of the collective poisoning of the staff, Shaun had also become irritable, but Glassman advised him that the more anxious he felt, the more important it was to maintain a calm mind. After receiving Glassman's guidance, Shaun's emotions finally stabilized. Meanwhile, the food poisoning incident was also resolved, and all the medical staff gradually regained consciousness. Joan, an elderly woman, had been trapped inside an iron lung for 50 years because of her lung problems and relied on the machine to breathe. Suddenly, the iron lung shut down, and as Joan's life hung by a thread, the doctors quickly hooked her up to the hospital's ventilator to keep her alive. However, this was not a long-term solution, so Shaun had to find a way to repair the iron lung. Luckily, Leah, who could fix almost anything except medicine, managed to repair the machine. But just then, the iron lung completely broke down, and to fix it, they would need replacement parts. However, the machine was a 50-year-old antique, and the original manufacturer had long since gone out of business. Leah found a vintage car repair shop and, after much persuasion, managed to obtain the necessary parts from the shop owner and successfully repaired the iron lung once again. But at that moment, Joan developed another problem. After examining her, Shaun realized that the issue was not with the machine, but that Joan had stayed outside the iron lung for too long, causing new damage to her trachea. They immediately scheduled surgery for Joan, but once Shaun opened up her chest, he realized that even if Joan returned to the iron lung, it would no longer help her. Within a few months, her trachea would rupture again, meaning that staying in or out of the iron lung were both dead ends. While everyone was at a loss, Shaun suggested installing the most advanced biventricular chest respirator, as her antique device should have been replaced long ago. But this led to a new problem. Joan was already over 50, and her spine was basically decorative at this point, completely unable to support the weight of the respirator. Shaun, however, insisted this was not an issue, and a spinal diagram appeared in his mind, leading him to believe that injecting cement into Joan's spine could increase its load-bearing capacity. This was the kind of solution only Shaun could come up with. However, when he tried to explain his idea to Joan, she refused to accept it, because after 50 years, she had developed deep feelings for the iron lung and had even given it a name. She simply did not want to leave it. Later, Joan's assistant Sophie approached Shaun, hoping he could persuade Joan, who seemed determined to die. Leah then came up with an idea. Joan's story had been featured in textbooks and even adapted into a movie, and her indomitable spirit had inspired many people, so they could use emotional appeals to rekindle Joan's will to live. Sophie thought it was a good idea and showed Joan a video compilation from the people she had inspired. Some were former depression patients who had found the courage to seek help after learning about Joan's story, and others were survivors of domestic violence who managed to escape their trauma. Their heartfelt words rekindled Joan's will to live, and she finally decided to leave the iron lung. The surgery was soon completed, and Joan, wearing her new respirator, was reborn. To thank Shaun and Leah for their support, Sophie proposed filming a reality show about them to dispel societal prejudice and doubts against people with autism. In the emergency room, Shaun treated a woman named Dana, who had suffered severe burns over most of her body, and just then her husband arrived with their daughter. But upon seeing her mother, the little girl turned to her father and said, "I want to go home." Those words pierced Dana's already wounded heart. Dana's condition was actually the result of a surgical error. During Shaun's surgery that day, a TV crew had come in, and their blinding lights were pointed directly at Shaun's eyes. At that moment, Dana's heart rate became erratic, but Shaun was distracted by the light shining in his eyes. From the observation deck, Marcus seemed unfazed and explained to Sophie that this was the facial expression Shaun made whenever he experienced a hallucination. But in truth, that was not the case this time, and as Dana's life teetered on the edge, Shaun finally snapped out of it and ordered the cameraman to turn off the lights and stop interfering with the surgery. Only after dealing with the distraction did Shaun proceed with rescuing Dana. However, after the surgery, Dana's face showed unusual symptoms. When Shaun pressed on her cheek, she said it hurt, which puzzled him because he had already administered anesthesia, and such pain shouldn't have occurred. Shaun suspected that Jordan might have mishandled Dana's care because a missing data point suggested a potential oversight. Upon realizing that she might have harmed the patient, Jordan broke down in tears and desperately searched for the cause. Everyone gathered together and reviewed the cameraman's footage frame by frame to catch any details. Soon, Shaun noticed that during Dana's initial examination, she had no sensation in her cheek. This indicated that Dana's wound was too deep, causing delayed pain responses. But at the time, distracted by the cameras, Shaun had failed to observe carefully enough, leading to an incomplete wound cleaning that caused further complications. Shaun realized that it was his own mistake. And worse, everything that happened had been captured by the TV crew, meaning if it leaked, his career could be ruined. But the immediate priority was to re-clean Dana's wound to prevent infection. This meant performing another surgery. The surgery began quickly, and this time, Shaun kicked the TV crew out of the operating room to avoid any further interference. However, during the procedure, Dana's facial wound tore open and blood gushed out, causing a flurry of activity as the team tried to stop the bleeding. Jordan suggested using cauterization to stop the bleeding, but doing so would permanently disfigure Dana's face. Faced with this dilemma, Shaun suddenly fell silent, staring into the void as the other doctors anxiously looked at him. Then Shaun spoke. "Cauterization won't work. We need to preserve as much healthy tissue as possible." He proposed using a water knife for the wound cleaning, which would minimize blood loss. The nurses quickly brought over the equipment, and Shaun successfully corrected his earlier mistake. Several hours later, Shaun announced the successful surgery to the TV crew waiting outside. Jordan even mimicked Shaun once again in front of the camera.
"I'll do the imitation again."
You can use all your footage, even my mistake. Great surgeons can make mistakes and still be inspirational.
Meanwhile, Dana's swelling had significantly subsided and her facial features had largely recovered. Her daughter also returned to the hospital room. This time, she wasn't scared by her mother's appearance and instead said, "Your eyes are still the same, just like mine." The mother and daughter embraced tightly, and the distance between them melted away.